Your body is receiving the transmission. And therefore, it can become the stability that will eventually percolate up through the different components of our system, from the physical into the vital, and then into the mental, and then in the realization of what it is that's been happening. When you wake up enough to realize you're in the midst of a transformational process, then you have the context to hold all the rest of your days. And that it has a purpose. And the purpose is to be an instrument and channel to serve humanity, to become a means by which this principle can come into the creation, this evolutionary accelerant that can take us beyond ourselves. So the journey of consciousness basically brings forward some basic principles that the body carries. The first is what I call the sat. The sat is an absolute. It doesn't exist within existence in the way we would know existence. It could not exist being all there is. So it had to create, just in that intent, when it created the tat, it created the asat, the not sat. These two principles live above and below. Our human body is organized from the below to the above. We stand on the earth, which is the below, which is an expression of the outside. And we look to the stars, to the heavens, which are an expression, an allegory of the sat. Our body is the place where the two can come together. Without the asat, the not sat, of the physical matter, and the biochemistry that creates the emotional body, and the neuroelectrical activities of the body itself, we would not know ascension. We wouldn't know anything. We would only know what was possible within the framework of the times we were born in that would allow us to survive as a species or not. But the movement allows for us to be, as awakened human beings, the intermediary between these two principles. We bring that which obscures with that which enlightens, and we bring them together in our consciousness until they come into our bodies. It can come into our bodies because inherent in the asat is also the sat. And inherent in the asat is this evolutionary impulse, even though it's bound, very bound. And it strives to wake up. It strives to come out of its bondage. And that lives in each of us, as in the cells, in the organization of our vital emotional body, and the organization of our mental body. So it is that which brings the aspiration, the longing, the wanting to become more than what we are. So even our desire, even our self-serving desire, is to have more, is to have different, to learn and grow in different ways that serve our ego, so it be. But the principle is still true. The asat brings an awakening from below that comes to join in to something that also is unknowable, just like the sat and the asat are unknowable from any way of knowing that we know. We can only know it through everything else. And they come together and they join in the middle of our body, the third chakra. And it's here that a fire gets ignited. In the human being, in all animals, is our digestion, our ability to digest food. It's also the inherent intelligence of our instinctual organization of our nervous system. It's also that which became the seed of what our mind is and what our intelligence became, which went beyond the body itself and entered into a zone of awareness we call it being or psychic being, that in earlier developments were instinct, but in human beings it's a form of knowing that's not bound by the senses, that interfaces with the senses, so that when we see through the human eye, we see something that's there beyond the usual human vision that can give us information about the change in the season, a coming threat, or maybe deeper in the body, a felt sense of something wrong, or a felt sense that there is something more over those hills. So this is there in human beings as a substitute for instinct. And it was the beginning of what became our intellect. But our intellect overtook our psychic knowing with factual languaging, where we started naming these things. We started differentiating many, many, many more things, breaking them down into infinite components, as we do as we make our chips to run our iPhones. Infinite fractions of a fraction of a fraction to make the computer that we carry around in our pockets. They're all part of the evolutionary unfolding, and they are what traps us, separates us from our own natural knowing that would be there, that would allow us to have a way of holding what arises within the content of our mind and vital and body otherwise. Another way of knowing. So often the spiritual path starts with a knowing, not knowing how you know, but a moving towards that which you don't yet know. This is the early signs of awakening. It's also the knowing that lets you know you're bound, that you're stuck, that you're being overtaken. And that's the dejection. Both forms of a knowing of a different order in both that are bondage and also the possibility of freedom, the possibility of coming out of the bondage. It's those dynamics that creates the anguish that is always a companion at every time we make a transition on the spiritual path. The anguish of transition is really the struggle each of you are going through in this program. The meeting of the obscurity and the resistance, and the opening of the possibility that's other than that. Those two concurrent is the sat and the asat, sorting itself out. It is in us, in our capacity to meet both, to the right proportion. Sometimes you have to be more in the sat, less of the asat, long enough so you can meet the sat enough that it can transmute and become part of the sat. So this overall principles are really the key of the journey of consciousness. When we become awakened human beings, we are in the last phase of the journey. And if you look at the chart that's in your manual, you'll see there's a movement of the sat becoming the asat, and then the asat evolving out of the asat towards the sat. 3/4 of the way it becomes a human being. And then the human being can become the means by which we complete the journey. The sat, the asat becomes the sat. Just like the sat became the asat becomes the sat. That's us. And what it does is it comes and manifests the fullness of the journey. That's what it means. What carries us the potential of all the great teachers, all the people who were able to complete the journey are the Supreme Being in all the times of humanity. They are merged in that principle. And they are all each emanations and expressions of that you can meet as you travel into the higher planes. So I am one of those, except now I'm still in a body. For as long as I'm in a body, then there is a unique thing that can happen, that can't happen if you're not in a body. And that is the transmission. Because the transmission comes through a vessel that's been prepared, that's been transformed sufficiently, it can be an intact human being. As a matter of fact, the more embodied it is, the more strong it is in its ability to carry this primal force and bring it into existence. And therefore, the more capable it is of accelerating the evolutionary process. Because from the place of the sat, when the sat becomes the Shree, it accelerates the entire creation's ability to evolve. And since right now the species that can know of this is humanity, but every living creature follows humanity. Every living creature looks up to the next higher form of itself to grow. That's its God. So the worm is to become the bird that eats it. It learns to grow outside of itself to become something more. So we lead as a species the planet. We are the ones actually that could wake up to the responsibility of being that for the world. So this is what has happened. It's now being languaged. It's now in this program as this handout. It's now in the organization of why we gather. It's not about your misery or your unworthiness or your shame or the habits or the way your body is reacting to the None of these things are anything but evidence that you're aligning yourself with a possibility much, much greater than what you can know from where you are now. If you just have faith in that, if you just have a sense of that, if you can hear it in my speaking and others speaking, and Satyapriya speaking and Satyamayi speaking, then you begin to attune yourself to the song. Because the song calls us up, does it not? It lifts us out of ourself. And we begin to be lifted into a place where we are singing the song. And what is that singing? It's not necessarily a word. It's not necessarily a speaking as it is with me. But it's a quality of being that others can access by simply being with you. Some of you know this is happening already. You can see your impact on others. You can feel their response to your being. And that's the evidence of the unfolding of the authority, the true authority that we become. When we break out of our littleness and our things of making that are unimportant important and what's important unimportant. When we break out our delusion, when we break out our strategies and break out of our fear and break out of all those things. We can't do this by ourselves, of course. We have to tap into something more. The more we access that, the more we attend to that, the more we become that. So we use the power of our attention instead of keeping ourselves bound, but use it as a path to freedom, path to love and truth, a path to being useful. All right, there you have it. That's the journey of consciousness.